选项，这应该还好。我想把声音弄大声，配音弄大声一点。配应该是人的声音。它有好几个游戏耶 ，DLC 要钱吧？我先看一开始的游戏。
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain.
这个好像有30分钟。
Since by tonight I shall be no more.
哦，可以用，这次就可以用滑鼠哎，允许你自己有趣的旅程。圈圈跟问号是有关短篇故事哦，隐藏，所以我要找到古神之杖，聚精会神。哦，好，我要说找到这个像树枝的东西。哦，这个东西，哦，洛夫克拉夫特的信，为什么要复书信件？原因比较特别。他精神衰弱，毛病越来越严重，所以他决定用书信来代替大多数的社交需求。哦，他身体已经那个虚弱到没办法直接跟我们讲话。H.P. 洛夫克拉夫特写给莱因哈特克莱纳的信，为什么莱因哈特克莱纳好像什么游戏角色哦？10万封信哦！哦，这是小故事 ，DLC 的小故事。哦。所以这只是一个小东西，它跟我们游戏没有关系。安安，乌鸦安安。
Penniless, and at the end of my supply,
刚刚玩完2个
which
demo
alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street.
啊，我的毒品用完了，所以我想要跳楼。
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
我就是身体已经衰弱到需要一直用吗啡。来写信喽。
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific.
现在玩游戏是有点像是看故事，说书人的故事。
Fell a victim to the German sea raider.
德国海狼的猎物。所以我被他们攻击了，他们来抢我的货物。
The Great War was then at its very beginning,
好呛，
and
德
the
国佬。
ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize.
合法攻
Whilst we
击，
of
他们
her
要把
crew
我
were
当
treated
战
with all
俘，
the
他们是不
fairness
是要
and
对我做很
consideration
绅士的
due
事
us
情
as naval prisoners.
问号，这可以干嘛？匈奴，哦，这是介绍，那没关系，那不重要。哦，我要逃跑。
Indeed was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
所以我们就偷偷的逃跑。哦，东西都带好了。我要逃跑啊！我要逃跑。
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
我觉得他其实做的感觉还不错。
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and
太厉害了
stars
吧！透
that
过
I was
太阳
somewhat
跟
south of the
星星，
equator.
这是月亮吧？好美哦！
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
这个游戏其实做的比想象中认真诶。看着月亮，我就可以往前。哦，太阳。
And for uncounted days, I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
我觉得他这个 水啊跟太阳做的很不错哎，我渴了，喝个水。
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
绝望到看太阳。
The change happened whilst I slept.
我觉醒了吗？
Details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
我靠，这是什么啊？我梦到了，这是什么海怪哦？哦，鱿鱼一只。
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see.
少年拍改版，少年拍没有鱿鱼可以吃吧
？And in which my boat lay grounded some distance away.
你看这个鱿鱼超衰小的，它的头卡在底下，脚在外面。
Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence.
感觉它的脚应该拿来做章鱼烧，应该很好吃，或鱿鱼烧。
There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
很多鱿鱼可以吃而且它是一边白天一边晚上，好酷哦。
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though
而且我发现有那个化石，那个什么菊石兽在这里。问号，这是三叶虫吧？大滚的起源，大滚的灵感来自欧洲短篇小说《鱼头》，故事里描述了混血鱼人与荒无人烟的湖泊中的怪鱼之间的扭曲。我梦到了邪恶艰辛的爬行。大滚它是以这篇故事来讲这个什么论大滚来讲这个故事。鱼类以及海水气味厌恶。不是重点是我不要看这个三叶虫好衰哦，比较像蟑螂这样还蛮恶的。我要回床上。这也不是少年拍的。
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position.
旁边还有一个东西会动。
Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me, that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean straining my ears, nor were there any seafowl.
这些恶心的排泄物都在地上，还有很多一直露下半身的鱿鱼、章鱼，好衰哦！他们头都卡到里面怎么会有这么衰的？他们怎么可以这么衰啊？这是鱼哦，我要吃鱼就对了。
For several hours, I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea. 你还可以吃哦，这么恶心，我都不想吃了。他们一直这样不会死哦。他们一直在摇屁股，还能呼吸哦。 I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease.
可以走了。
The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
好，我要前进了。 冲啊！我要离开这里哦！终于死掉一部分的乌贼，还是鱿鱼。
All day I
我靠，
forged
这边
steadily
换新的品
westward,
种
guided
哎，
by
这
a
是什么
faraway
啊？
hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
哎，其实我觉得它声音还蛮好听的。哎，这几个是什么啊？这是什么爪子哦？这是什么异形的爪子哦？哎，我知道啊，这是螃蟹，是螃蟹，然后还有金鱼。哎，我要吃螃蟹，我要吃螃蟹啊！
That night I encamped, and on the following day
哎，
still
这是什么
traveled
啊
toward the hummock.
这是蛇
Though that
吗？
object seemed
哎，
scarcely
好歹让我
nearer
看一下它
than
们是
when
什么
I'd
东
first
西吧。
espied it.
这样我才可以判断我要不要把它们切来吃啊。所以我只能继续走哦，一定是觉得这个不好吃。
By the fourth evening, I
已经走到
attained
第
the
4
base
天
of the
了。
mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in
靠，
the
竟然
shadow
睡
of the
着
hill.
我佩服他。
I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain,
我不会最后
I
醒来
was
在海
awake
上
in a
吧？哦，
cold
没有哎，
perspiration,
还在这里哦
determined。to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon, I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day.
啊？为什么？
Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less
还想
energy.
说白天走很热，所以应该要晚上走才
Indeed,
对。
I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
靠，太有
Picking up my pack,
太有
I
精
stopped
神了吧？这时候你还要爬山，大哥你认真。
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon.
哎，我觉得他其实根本不怕啊，他的口气我感受不到
whose
害怕，
black
但我觉得风景还
recesses
蛮
the
漂
moon
亮，
had not yet soared
就是
high
做的还
enough
蛮
to
不错的。
illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the
我
world,
走到地平线的边缘，真的假的这么厉害？
peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious
失
reminiscences of
乐园中
Paradise
的段
Lost
落。
and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so
这个游戏会不会太
perpendicular.
文学一点？但是我承认风景很美。
Ledges and outcroppings
我不会往下
of rock
跳吧？
afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Go go go， 往下走就是要往下走。啊，不是啊，到底为什么海
Urged
会
on
变
by
成
an
那个？
impulse which I cannot definitely
靠，我不会要
analyze,
往前
I
爬吧？
scrambled
往前
with
走那个
difficulty down the
正
rocks
方
and
形的
stood on the gentler
柱
slope
子。
beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet
有吗？
penetrated.
谷底哦。
All at once,
对，
my
就这一
attention was
根。
captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite
它
slope.
发亮哎，
An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the
这
ascending
是台北
moon.
101，所以我要出发去那边。哎，太远
That
了
it
吧？
was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
哎，不是很多故事
A
都是
closer
说，
scrutiny filled me
你
with
明明知道那
sensations
个
I
地方
cannot
会死，你还一直
express.
往那里走，或是什么不是有一些那个故事都会说什么
Despite its enormous
偏偏不要分开走，大家都说
its
就是有
position
8个
in an
岔路，
abyss
然后就说
which
不要
had
分
yawned
开
at
走，
the bottom of the
然后
sea
大家就
since
偏
the
偏要分
world
开
was
走，然后就
young.
都死光了。
I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps
有
the
思想的
worship
智
of
慧
living
生
and
物，
thinking creatures.
然后我就被吃
Dazed
掉。
and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
我怀疑这个人其实是 hentai。 哦，这有水了。
Now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
我应该可以过去看吧。
The writing was in a system of
什么
hieroglyphics
章鱼
unknown to
跟
me, and
鱼，
unlike
还有
anything
鳄
I'd
鱼，
ever
还有
seen
乌
in
龟，
books.
还有蛇，还有很多贝壳，所以这是什么海产大亨？这也是卖海产的。
Consisting for the most part.
哎，看哪里看出鳗鱼啊？怎么会有鳗鱼？我章鱼看出来了，鱼甲壳生物、软体动物，可是我没有看到鳗鱼啊，里面就有乌龟，还有鳄鱼，鳗鱼到底在哪？
Several characters obviously represented marine things which are
底下就不知道什
unknown
么
to the
了。
modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the
菊石
ocean
兽吗？
recently.
还有什么？
It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
这样也着迷。这是什么？我看一下，又是大滚，疯狂山脉无名之城。哦，克鲁苏就是章鱼，克鲁苏是的确是神话系列的，不剧透。
Plainly visible across the
所以那些好吃的章鱼是克鲁苏，是海妖、海怪。
whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Dore.
这游戏应该是把各个国外的那个幻想神话故事结合成一个叙事的游戏，
I think
然后
that
看
these
故
things
事。
were supposed to depict
啊，
men.
克苏鲁啊，随便啦，大家知道是什么就好。我只是不小心把鲁先念就变克鲁苏，克鲁苏不是比较好吃的感觉吗？
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
啊，哎呦，这个是不是一个人脸啊？乌龟的脸哦。
Or paying homage at some monolithic
啊，他
shrine
在膜拜
which
哦。
appeared to be under
这个
the
东
waves
西，
as
这个
well.
东西看起来超像乌龟的脸，但是对我笑哎。
Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes
整
me
天
grow
喘不过
faint.
气，乱念就是我的
Grotesque
强
beyond the
项。
imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
所以这四个脸就是 ET， 然后他们就会连接。
They were damnably human in general outline.
他是哪里看到手脚啊？明明就只有四个头。
Wide and flabby lip, glassy, bulging eyes,
玻璃珠般的
and other
眼睛
features
一定是
less pleasant to
ET，
recall.
外星人。
Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale,
底下有很多金
represented
鱼，
as
哎，
but
好
little
吃哎。
larger than himself.
对啊，我们刚刚走路有看到
I
金鱼，
remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness
哎，
and
超像，
strange
他一直呛他们
size,
很丑。
but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or sea. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
不要说人家很丑，你等下就被人家抓去改造。
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring
我是
anthropologist,
掉到异世界哦。
I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me.
哦，怪要出
Then,
现了吗？
suddenly, I saw
我
it.
靠，不会异形要出哦，异形出来了，不要
With
啊
only a slight churning to mark its
！Oh
rise
my
to the
god，
surface,
哪里细微声响，明明超大声的。你看那个水这么明显，
Dislike and loathsome,
我靠，
like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith.
太大只了吧！
About which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head.
还有他们要杀我，
and gave vent
然后
to
还有我们
certain
要逃命。
sounds.
如果这个游戏要我要逃命，我一定马上惨叫。哦，我又睡着了。
I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat.
明明哪里不知道，我现在在操控，我就知道我走回去啦。
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly.
哇，我痴呆了，看到很多螃蟹我就痴呆了。螃蟹脚，给我带着走。螃蟹很贵，哎，下雨了。
Indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
哎，螃蟹很赞哎，现在螃蟹都很贵哎。我要吃松叶蟹，我要吃雪场蟹，我要吃龙虾。刚刚那个大只一定比雪场蟹还好吃。
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San
我醒
Francisco
了，我在
hospital.
医院里啊，我一定是疯
Brought
了。
thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant
所
attention.
以意思就是说，其实我已经发疯了。
Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing.
啊，那我到底是怎样被救起来？我是什么样的情况下被救起来？因为他们说不知道太平洋中有任何陆地，所以他救我的时候是我在船上面，然后在海滩上，不是船在海上，然后我在船上面吗？
Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
我这有无神论者，这是额外的故事，不要看这个，我还是认真看我的故事。哦，门给我打开了。
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the
菲
ancient
利
Philistine
斯
legend
汀，
of
刚才他讲
Dagon,
菲利
the
基，
fish god.
鱼神大滚，所以是鱼神大滚Dagon，菲利斯汀人的主神哦，所以是鱼神哦，还真是鱼神呢，理解错误。DAG 是鱼的意思，还是大滚是一名掌管寄宿于海底鱼人族深潜者们的深海神祇。大滚密社是邪恶教主哈，所以这边是邪恶的东西。哦，所以我已经着迷了，我要加入秘密
But soon
教会。
perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
这么多书可以看啊！哦，克苏鲁神话，我没有念错了吧？我要走到灯这边。我走到灯这里啦，哦，又有东西哦。科学家大滚发表年代不小的争论。科学家这边一直在解释，这样我就没办法认真看我的游戏啦。
It is at night,
我又回来了，
especially when the moon
我
is
又回
gibbous
嗑药的
and
地方。
green, that I see the thing. I tried morphine,
啊！我为了看那个东西，我在
but the
嗑
drug
药
has
哦。
given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave.
我就为了看那个鱼神。
So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
啊，我可以拒绝吗？不要那个，我不想看，那个已经久。
Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the
啊，
open
我又回到
boat
船上了。
after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a
而
hideous
且很
and
惨
vivid
哎
vision in
会一直
reply.
这个幻象
I
一直跑
cannot
来
think of the
哎。
deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling
就是你只要做梦，就会一直梦到这个剧情。
Worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst
那一些
universal
深海鱼人会把我们侵犯掉吗？然后我们就会被这些怪物杀死。不愧是恐怖神话故事。啊，我还没死哦。
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery
想要
body
湿滑的躯体想要冲进来，我觉得不行。我觉得母汤，请不要进来，求求你。
It shall not find me.
我们是嗑药嗑多啦，我觉得这是一个嗑药者的。哦不，不要开我的门，我拒绝。
God, that hand!
God, that hand! So delicious!
The window!
Window! 哦，然后就自杀了。啊！怎么跟我前几天玩游戏的叫声一样啊？